first of all, welcome to the world of Manveer Singh. Woo! No, good audience, these guys. So, this is a chance where you get to find out a little bit more about Manveer. This is a really informal way of just finding out about, the personality behind the music. So, also, this is a chance for you guys as well to ask some questions. Music. How did you come about the music scene in the first place?
Yeah, well, I went to Manchester to study surveying, and it was during my surveying degree that I was diagnosed with the eyesight problem. So, although I finished my course, and we'd done a nationwide search with the RNIB trying to find an area within the surveying field where I could get some work. It's very site dependent, so it was almost a total change of career. And I've been playing tabla for a while, but very folk orientated, playing the temple and stuff like that. So it wasn't classical trained. I wasn't a classically trained tabla player as such, and I was quite fortunate at the conservatoire at the time. They were running a Beamer's Honours in Rag Sangeet, which is Indian classical music, and that's where I had the fortune of meeting my teacher, the Ustad Sarvar Sabri, who unfortunately wasn't able to come today because he has a gig also, but he's been quite an inspiration and he's a mentor to me in many ways, not just musically, in life.
Being a musician generally is hard enough. Getting successful, getting gigs, developing your music, being seen as being a talented musician is hard enough as it is, right? So
Yeah.
What was it like for you as a person, slowly but surely losing a sight that you've been born with? What was that like for you?
I don't consider myself to be some superstar musician, but it's a lot about the way you present yourself, the people you get to know. I was quite fortunate being at the conservatoire. There were so many musicians around who, especially really interested in different music. So I was a tabla player. There was lots of jazzers. In fact, composition students and jazzers were the main sort of group of people that I spent a lot of time with at the conservatoire. Obviously, with the eyesight thing, there's sort of two sides for me. There's the practical change. Obviously, at the age of 23, I was still driving. Yeah, about that. And then obviously the whole change in career and stuff. It was quite a big change in my life. But I think I sort of rolled with it. Obviously, it was a deteriorating problem. So my vision 5 years ago, 6 years ago, was a lot better than it is now. So it is obviously there's an emotional, psychological impact as you lose your eyesight over a period of time. Music did help with that, and as far as the practical side of it, obviously it gets harder. Shopping, taking money out from the bank machine, things like that. But something you have to live with, and I think I've done all right. And there's been fantastic people around, especially in the last couple of years when things have got quite difficult.
What about the idea of the music industry? Were they accepting of your disability? Were they supportive?
I've never, ever had any problems with any musicians I've worked with, any projects I've been involved with. They've always been quite accommodating. They've always tried to make things easier for me, in the sense of any difficulties I'm facing due to my disability. So there hasn't really been a huge amount of problems there.
So if someone uses that as an excuse, you'd happily say it's about the music?
I think if you're motivated and you work hard and try to remain positive, the opportunities present themselves. And I think you can achieve your aims and goals.
How about the process? The process for you in regards to musically. How do you guys get together and create these ensembles? Because, watching you guys perform and hearing all these mix of melodies and mix of genres is pretty impressive. How do you go about it? Do you meet in the pub or do you go down the conservatoire? How does it happen for those music lovers out there?
It just happens. Honestly, it does. You're socialising, you're chilling out, you talk, you get together, you have a jam. Certain musicians, it could be just a personality thing. You could meet somebody and actually get along with them. And that in its own right, you sit there and share information, styles, and talk about stuff. Usually, with the whole collaborative thing, somebody comes up with an idea, you sit there, you jam, you play around it, you develop it. And like I said, with some of the My Journey stuff, it has changed. Although fundamentally the structures are there, but things have evolved over a certain amount of time, especially when we've had to change a musician, bring another person in, because the music isn't totally fixed. There's lots of room for improvisation, and the way somebody embellishes something, the way they develop something, from themselves. That's the whole improvisation thing.
The fact that people always say music, goes across many languages, many cultures, many statuses. You don't have to have grown up in the same way to understand a feeling or an emotion or understand when a beat is off. So in terms of from a disability, how has that helped you express yourself?
I don't think the disability as such has had an impact upon that. I was actually talking to a friend the other day about this, saying, hey, if you're listening to music, am I hearing the music better than somebody who can see? And the more I've thought about it, it doesn't really have an impact in that sense. There was a friend who was hearing something that I wasn't able to hear until he highlighted it. So I think from that aspect, I'm probably more aware of sounds generally because I'm not seeing. But I'm definitely, when it comes to music, I think it's your whole personal, sense of hearing something and what you focus in on.
How about emotionally? Do you find that you use your own emotions of stuff that you've had to go through in your music?
I've used music in a sense to help with my emotional sort of turmoil, let's say, in time, whether it's listening, whether it's practicing, so it can be a meditation in its own right. Sitting there and doing, there's a time, as I'm sure any, serious musicians, if you sit down and practice for, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5, 6 hours in a day, I mean, it becomes sort of almost, like I said, meditative.
So it's like a recycling process. You're putting your emotion into your music's affecting you emotionally.
It's helping you also.
Quite a powerful method.
As far as highlights within the last sort of 6 years, 5 years, I'd say obviously the WOMAD performance, playing Jules Holland, the national tour with My Journey. That was the whole production was sort of based around my sight and sight loss and that particular journey, and having travelled around the country with that. From a personal perspective, having finished my first course, just the fact I finished it, and then literally finished in June and started up the next course in September, went through 4 years of that, and then got the scholarship to do the postgrad. I mean, that's an achievement, I think, in its own right.
Do you think you have to be... Ask another question for you, random here. Do you think you have to be born with music in you? Do you feel like, in terms of from your experience, or maybe others you've seen, do you have to be grown up with it, or was it in everybody?
It helps if you're around it as a child, I'm sure. But in my experience of things, and in my opinion, I should say, that I've met people who are just very talented. They have a really good sense of pitch or a good sense of rhythm. But I do believe that if you are not as talented, you work hard, you can still achieve a really good standard. In fact, my teacher once said to me that 99% of it is really the hard work that goes into it. And in fact, you'll get a lot of young talented musicians who sort of burn out after a very short while. So, at 14, 15, they're playing fantastic. And at 21, nobody's heard of them. They've sort of disappeared off the scene. Whereas those people that, for one person it might take half an hour to learn something, it might take the other guy an hour, but he has to put that bit, or she, I should say, put that extra bit of hard work in. It sort of stays with you as well. So if you persevere and work hard at something, I think you can still achieve a really good standard.
Was it natural for you?
I think I was quite musical generally, but I wouldn't say I was like overly talented. But I worked quite hard for a little while. And in the short period of time at the conservatoire, just to understand Indian classical music, I'm sure Roops would vouch for that. It's a huge genre, isn't it? You can spend, what did they say, a whole lifetime learning, Indian classical music.
How have you used that learning that you've got from classical Indian music to mix with your Western understanding?
I can answer that really easily. I think the music played today shows it clearly because, I'm not a jazzer, I'm not a blues musician, but I enjoy the music. I feel for that music. Yeah.
Do you think you need to have been born or even have been brought up in that music genre to get it?
You have to absorb yourself in that culture. You don't necessarily have to be there. And I think Rupinder is a fantastic example because you haven't actually gone to India to train on sitar. All Roop's training has been done here in England. She worked with various artists who have come from India and had training with some of them. And your teacher, I believe, Rambiji, was a student of Valed Khan Sahab, who's a great sitar maestro from India. But all the training's been done here. and Rupe's playing fantastically well.